So this painting here was painted in Osoyoos back in July of 2016 recently. And it's painting over 4 days, 2-hour sessions over those 4 days in the mornings from about 7 to 9. The reason it was painted over 4 days is because the light changed so much after 9 o'clock that I would just lose that entire light altogether, and it'd be a mismatch of different lighting situations, which I didn't want. So what I've done is I recorded each session over those 4 days, and I put it in a time lapse. The time lapse is a little bit long, but I've tried to narrate throughout it, and I've cut a few pieces out as well to make it more interesting for you and to provide some information on my process of painting large landscapes outside. If you have any questions while watching it, please leave them in the comments below. I encourage you to like this video because it really helps my YouTube cred. It helps elevate my videos in the suggested video section, and it really just helps me get more views. So I really appreciate it if you can hit that like button. So no more rambling from myself. Let's just get into the time lapse. I'll see you at the end. So with every plein air piece, I spend a considerable amount of time sketching it out, charcoal on board in this instance, using my cell phone just to give me some compositional ideas, laying in the corners of the mountains, and I progress into the rest of the scene, tweaking the shapes. Just putting in what I need. Don't really need a whole heck of a lot. I mean, we just have some mountainous hills and a lot of water. And I decided to lay in the grass plain first, sort of key in that green, and then I just start filling in the water. Going for a dark tone, but you'll see me darken it up quite a bit later. Really light wash, blues and greens and violets. And I see some clouds in the background. I just want to get their essence in more than anything, and then I just start into the mountains because I realized the light's going to move so fast. I have to get these in first, really. So you see me block these in, and each mountain sequentially gets more light on it. The very back ones get the first kiss of light, and then moving inward a little bit, they get the next, and then so forth as we go progress to the right. So in the next days, you'll see me primarily working on the far one first, then the next one, and then the next one. So here I'm laying in the grassland next to the mountains. Osoyoos is considered a dry lands. Some people call it a desert. It's not technically a desert, but it's more of an arid land, so it's quite different foliage than the Pacific Northwest that I live in. More or less just trying to put the light on the back foothill mountain. And then I decided to go into the dark shadows, moving into the mid-tones. I always just go back and forth in every piece that I do. More shadows, a little more bluer as I come forward. That'll change later on, you'll see. More or less, I'm just trying to block in all the values in some sort of color just to remove the white, because then that's when you can really make your decisions on your correct values. And that's kind of how I paint. Filling in that grassland and going darker and richer in the water here. The initial wash wasn't punchy enough, so I had to go back in. And the water is something that developed more than the mountains, I would say, because they had a structure, whereas the water was ever changing from minute to minute, and of course day to day. Filling in the clouds. It was sort of a cloudy day, so I got a grayer wash in there. You'll see as we progress into the next day, it's a lot different. It's really bright, but I generally keep the same sort of idea with it in the sky. Going in more in the lights and going down to the beach side, then I'm popping it back up in the mountains, trying to catch where there's nuances in the shadow. A little bit of violets, some greens, a little bit darks within the flat plain there, and then really darkening the water now. Trying to make a big difference. Here we are the second day. You can see the difference in lighting, right? Not just on my canvas, but also in the scene itself. So working on that back mountain, then progressively moving forward a little bit, and I'll move to the next one, and I'll move to the next one, just to catch that light. A little more darks. More or less just tweaking everything. This was an interesting large landscape to paint in 2-hour sessions over 4 days, because each day everything was different. So you got to make a decision on how much do I change, what do I change, is it good for the painting or is it not good for the painting. However, change is always good. Worst case, you just got to rework it and make it better. Doing some dull grays in that second mountain there, a little bit of violets popped in, going a little bit darker just in the shadows there. Feeling of distant trees and a little more violets. Trying to get a variety of plains within these mountains. And just trying to mass in that foreground mountain. It's just one kind of value shifting dark, because I didn't want a lot of emphasis there. Going back to the grass plains, adding some green highlights, sort of where the light is kissing it in the distance. I want to just add those in as I see it, and then I'll move on, right? More shadows within that mountain area. Just laying it in, and then you'll see that mountain I'm working on right now change the next day. Coming up, I'll make it larger because I got the proportions a little bit wrong. Moving back into that grasslands, kind of graying it out, making it a little more neutral, and working into the sky, kind of lighting it against the background mountains. It's a different day, right? So I had to sort of adjust it each day until I was happy with something that I had. Adding a little more chroma into the water. Working on the beach, adding a little bit of light on the beach. Bringing some light into the water. Here I'm kind of defining this day. I think I could see some reflection of the mountains within the water. So I kind of put that in. You'll notice later on that I take that out. Each day was so different with that water, and the third and fourth day were the best days, and that's when the water really came to life. I'm sort of messing up that right hand or left hand corner of the sky, kind of make it more neutral and more dark, so it pushes you into the painting. And you'll see later I'll add a cloud, and here we go, reflecting the mountains within the water, and that will be removed a little bit later on. Going back into the sky, adjusting values, putting in some warmers, some coolers, some lighters, some more neutrals, even adding some green into the water now. And I saw this cloud there, and I thought, okay, I'm going to paint this in because it's just a fascinating cloud. The light was kissing it really nice. And then I'll decide whether or not I keep it. And it's one of those features that actually made it into the final painting. You'll see it evolve over time, but it didn't make it into the final painting because it was just something that I thought provided a little bit of interest. Lightening the water as I come a little bit closer, emphasizing those mountain shapes, reflections. Moving into the back mountain, I think this is a different day. I'm just tweaking things. Trying to get that shape of the mountain first, working on that back as the light comes up over the horizon, then working on this mountain as the light comes up, going back, adjusting, waiting for those 5 minutes to pass, and I'll move back into the next mountain. The light was such a fascinating object in this scene that it was a challenge to keep up with it. A little bit of variety in temperature and colors in the shadows on that mountain I'm painting right now. Some warms and cools, some greens and violets, some oranges. Moving to the foreground mountain for some reason. Can't remember why. It looks like I just wanted to get some dark ins and get a little bit of light peeking through. This mountain will change though. It'll get a little bit larger later on. And readjusting that light that hits the peak of that little side there. And putting in some lights, going back into the mids and the darks, and it's just a dance back and forth with what I happen to see until you're happy with it. You can just change it all the time. That big foreground I did a scrape off and just did a more of a neutral violet. I will tweak that color a little bit. And this streak right here is that's the day I saw that. It was just coming across the water beautifully, and I thought, oh, I have to put that in. And it changes the composition quite a lot. It's a direct force pushing you over from left to right, and I really liked how that worked with the painting. Instead of trying to get this large body of water doing something interesting to bring you up to the mountains, this way it kind of directs you over to the mountains. And so I keep that general theme for the water as we progress, and you see I'm mixing some variety of colors within the water. Back and forth from the water to the mountains, to the water to the mountains. A little bit of knife work, premature. but I do come back and kind of scrape it off and then rework that area. And here I am measuring and noticing that, yeah, something's weird here. And that mountain had to change. So increasing the size and putting in the light and then the darks and then a little bit of violets. Just trying to capture some interest in there. And of course these mountains don't necessarily have these vibrant colors in them. It's my interpretation of them. They're more of a very dull, neutral green. And I just wanted to make sure I added some color to make it more interesting. Playing with the foreground mountain, adding some light into that secondary background mountain, and playing with it as I see the light coming through. Now working back into the sky, lightening over that mountain. And the sky was quite organic. Each day was different, and I tried to incorporate something from each day into the sky while still maintaining its credibility and interest throughout the painting. Adding a little bit of sky holes throughout the clouds there. Just try to break things up, provide a little more interest. And you can see me straightening out all that knife work I did previously. Just darkening the shoreline there, adding a little bit more chroma into the greens. Adjusting the shadows. Did a little bit of white there, but then I started bringing in a nice dark value. Just to help bring a contrast within that water, I think. We'll see what I do with it. I can't remember if I leave it that dark or I adjust it. I actually think I made the water around it as dark, so it didn't stand out as much. And back and forth, mountain, sky, water, mountain, sky, water. And there were quite a few people coming up and talking to me throughout this process, but I cut them out, obviously. And it's great to talk with people, but at the same time, they're taking up my time in terms of I need to get it and paint that light. I need to paint that light. Otherwise, it just moves so fast. You lose those moments when you say, "Ah, that's it. That's what I need to put in there." And to me, that's the key of painting. Much like that big, long horizontal stroke in the water. When I saw that, I knew I had to put it in there. Adjusting the back mountain, making it a little bit softer, a little bit more blue, lighter, and then coming back into the foreground. Adjusting the beach. I had to put a coat on here because it was getting kind of cold that day, surprisingly. A little bit of knife work, making the water a little bit darker in the foreground, and then while also adding a little bit warms into the water itself. Because when you look into the water, with the angle of incidence, you can start seeing through the water a little bit as you get closer to the shore. So I want to sort of bring that to light. A little bit more chroma into the water in areas. And you can see how much darker it's gotten since day 1 and day 2. A little bit darker on the left-hand edge with the idea of bringing it, pushing you through from left to right. A little bit lighter as you get to the land, so it helps your eye make it to the land. That's my rationale anyway. Kind of just adding some values of color all within that water. Some pinks, some violets, some yellows, some oranges to give it those sparkles and the flavor and the nuance. Still working on the water, try to bring it to life more or less. The more darks on the left so I can help bring you into the right, darker on the land, trying to emphasize those shadows on the mountains. It was always just, what do I add next, what do I add next, where do I add it? Going back to the water, trying to add a little more flavor, adding some oranges in there. Some blues, some more greens on the meadow before the mountains itself. Now it's a little bit, few lights into the water, start making a little sparkle. This is where I have a rigger where I'm just using a thin wash of lighter blue and just trying to work in its way through the paint to give it a little sense of sparkling. Laying down the waves on the water that make everything else sit down properly. A little more interest in that foreground there. A little more rigger work. Some lights over darks. Trying to de-emphasize the background water there to create more interest in the foreground water. Adjusting the sky, softening the edges, tweaking some temperatures and whatnot. Overall, and that's the final piece. Here we have a close-up. You can look at distant trees in the mountains. You can see the variety of color in each of those mountains. And here's the meadow against the mountains and the water. You can see the variety of color I have in there. It's just from oranges to violets to greens. Pretty much all in the same value, but with tweaks of highlights here and there to create some interest. Going from down that cloud that I really like, down the mountains into the water.
and into my final signature.
Hey, I just wanted to say thank you for watching this video. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Please hit that like button. It really helps with my YouTube stats. Share it with friends. And if you haven't already, please subscribe.